Good evening, and welcome to your myth time. Tonight, I want to take you into a story that has been misunderstood for millennia. Not the tale of a monster slain by a hero, but a true journey about trauma, labels, and finding yourself again. You'll become Medusa, experiencing the complete path from innocence to pain, from despair to awakening. In this story, you'll discover that sometimes the deepest wounds come from the world's misunderstanding of you, and the greatest courage is choosing to believe in the goodness of your own heart when everyone else fears you. You were born in the deepest part of the Aegean Sea, in a crystal palace where the water was always the purest blue. Sunlight filtered through the surface, casting golden spots around your cradle. You are the daughter of the sea god Perseus and the earth goddess Ceto. Your name is Medusa, which in the ancient tongue means guardian. Do you remember your childhood? You had the most beautiful face in the mortal world, golden hair that danced like seaweed in the water, eyes like the most precious sapphires in the deep sea, skin smooth as pearls. But more importantly, you had a pure and kind heart. Whenever lost ships encountered storms at sea, you were always the first to swim to the surface, guiding them with your song. Your voice could calm the most violent waves. Your smile could dispel the darkest clouds. In the Crystal Palace, you grew up with your two sisters, Steno and Uriel. They were beautiful too, but you were the most special of the three sisters. Not just because of your beauty, but because of your love for life and care for others. You often swam alone to the surface, watching the human world with curiosity and kindness in your heart. Your favorite time was at dusk, when the sunset painted the sea golden red. You would float on the surface, watching distant fishing boats return home, listening to the fishermen sing their homecoming songs. Sometimes you would quietly follow behind their boats, ensuring they reached port safely. You never let them see you, because your father had told you there were insurmountable boundaries between humans and gods. But deep in your heart, you always longed to truly help those in need. You weren't satisfied with just protecting from the shadows. You wanted to walk in the sunlight, using your power to bring more goodness to the world. This desire grew stronger in your heart each day, like a seed waiting for the right moment to sprout. At that time, you trusted the world completely. You believed that kindness would be met with kindness in return, that beautiful hearts would be understood and cherished. You even began to dream of one day leaving the deep sea to go to the human world, becoming a bridge between gods and mortals. You imagined yourself standing in a temple, receiving people's prayers, using your power to bring them peace and hope. Do you remember that decision that changed everything? On your 18th birthday, you finally gathered the courage to make a request to your father. Father, I want to serve in Athena's temple. I want to use my power to help more people." Your father was silent for a long time, then finally nodded in agreement. There was a worry in his eyes that you couldn't understand at the time. Now you know it was a father's premonition of the fate his daughter was about to face. When you first stepped on land and entered Athena's temple, your heart was filled with a sacred sense of mission. The marble columns of the temple soared into the clouds. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows onto the floor, creating beautiful patterns of light and shadow. You knelt before Athena's statue and devoutly made your vow. "I am willing to dedicate my life to guarding this temple, protecting all who come here seeking help." At that time, you didn't know that fate had already quietly cast its net. In your days at Athena's temple, you devoted yourself completely to service. Every morning, you would rise with the first ray of sunlight entering the temple, carefully cleaning every column, every floor tile. You used incense made with seawater for the statue, sang ancient hymns with your heavenly voice. People who came to pray were all amazed by your beauty and kindness. When elderly mothers prayed for their sick children, you would hold their hands, giving them comfort with your warm power. When confused young people sought direction in life, you would listen patiently and offer wise advice. When wounded warriors needed healing, you would use the healing arts learned from the sea god to treat their injuries. Your reputation quickly spread throughout Athens. People began making special trips, not only to pray to Athena, but also to see you. They called you the Pearl of the Temple, Athena's most beautiful priestess. Your heart was filled with satisfaction. You felt you had finally found the meaning of your life. But there was a pair of eyes that had been watching you from the shadows. Poseidon, the sea god, your father's brother, one of the 12 Olympian gods. The first time he saw you, he was deeply attracted by your beauty. Not just your physical beauty, but the aura of pure kindness about you, that love for life and care for others. These qualities were so rare on Mount Olympus that they sparked an intense possessiveness in him. At first, Poseidon tried to approach you in normal ways. He would disguise himself as an ordinary worshiper to visit the temple, observing your every move. He would appear when you prayed alone by the sea, trying to talk with you. But you always maintained proper distance, because you knew your duty was to serve Athena, not to entangle with other gods. Medusa, one evening, as you gathered flowers in the garden behind the temple, Poseidon suddenly appeared before you. His tall, mighty form made his trident gleam in the sunset. "Why do you always refuse me? Don't you know that as the sea god, I can give you more than this temple ever could?" You replied politely but firmly, "Respected Lord Poseidon, I have already made a vow to Athena. My life is dedicated to this temple. Please understand my choice." You saw a flash of anger in his eyes, but you thought he would respect your decision. You were wrong. In the following months, Poseidon's pursuit became increasingly intense and unscrupulous. He would suddenly appear while you worked, interrupting your prayers. He would create tsunamis at night just to make you leave the temple to calm the waves, then take the opportunity to approach you. He even threatened to destroy nearby fishing villages if you didn't accept his courtship. You began to feel afraid. This wasn't the love you had imagined. This was a terrible possessiveness, a compulsion that completely disregarded your will. You tried to pray to Athena for protection, but the goddess seemed not to respond to your pleas. You began to understand that even gods had forces they couldn't oppose. That night that changed everything finally came. It was a dark and windy night. You were conducting the nighttime prayer ritual in the inner sanctuary of the temple. Suddenly, the temple doors were blown open by fierce wind, and Poseidon appeared in the doorway. His eyes burned with mad desire. His trident emanated a threatening glow. Medusa, my patience is exhausted. Tonight, you must make a choice. His voice thundered throughout the temple. You knelt before Athena's statue, trembling as you said, I have already told you, I cannot betray my vow. Please leave and do not defile this sacred place. But Poseidon had already lost his reason. He strode toward you, the madness in his eyes making you realize what terrible thing was about to happen. You wanted to run, but the temple doors had been sealed by his power. You wanted to call for help, but your voice became weak and powerless under his oppression. Under the gaze of Athena's statue, in this place that should have been most sacred and safe, Poseidon did the unforgivable to you. Your innocence was torn apart, your faith was trampled, your soul was forever changed. When it was all over, Poseidon left satisfied, as if nothing had happened, and you lay on the cold marble floor, feeling the double trauma of body and soul. You looked at Athena's statue. Those carved stone eyes seemed to be judging you, but gave you no comfort or protection. You didn't know this was only the beginning of the nightmare. When dawn's light entered the temple, you were still curled up at the foot of Athena's statue. Your body was trembling, not just from cold, but from the tearing pain deep in your heart. You tried to stand up, but your legs were as weak as seaweed. You looked at your torn clothing, at the bloodstains on the floor. Everything reminded you that what happened last night was not a nightmare. You used all your strength to crawl to the temple's sacred spring, wanting to cleanse yourself. But when you saw your reflection in the water, you found that the light in your eyes was gone, replaced by deep despair and fear. You wanted to cry, but your tears seemed to have dried up. Goddess Athena, You prayed with a trembling voice. Why didn't you protect me? Why did you let this happen in your temple? But only hollow echoes answered you. In the following days, you tried to continue your work as usual. You told yourself that maybe time could heal everything. Maybe you could forget that terrible night and start over. But you discovered that trauma doesn't heal so easily. Every time a male believer entered the temple, you would tremble involuntarily. Every time night fell, you would remember that dark night. Worse still, you began to notice that others looked at you differently. At first you thought it was your imagination, but soon you were certain. Those who once respected and loved you now looked at you with strange expressions. Some with pity, some with suspicion, and some with disgust. I heard Medusa and Poseidon. You overheard two priestesses whispering, "Shh, keep your voice down, but in the temple, that's so inappropriate. Maybe she seduced the sea god. After all, she's so beautiful. Goddess Athena must be very angry." Your heart felt like it was being cut by knives. They didn't know the truth. They thought you had initiated it, thought you had betrayed your vow to Athena. You wanted to explain, to tell them the truth, but who would believe you? Who would believe that a sea god would force a helpless girl? In their eyes, maybe you were willing, maybe you betrayed Athena for greater power. Rumors spread like plague. Soon the entire city of Athens was discussing this matter. Some said you were an unchaste woman. Some said you defiled the temple's sanctity. Others said you would bring misfortune to the city. Those who once praised you now avoided your gaze. Those who once sought your help no longer came to the temple. Most painful of all, you began to doubt yourself. In countless sleepless nights, you would think, maybe it really was my fault. Maybe I should have refused Poseidon more firmly. Maybe I did something wrong, so Athena didn't protect me. This self-doubt was more painful than any external accusation. You began to feel you really were a sinner, really had defiled the temple's sanctity. You began to believe those rumors, began to think you didn't deserve the respect and love people once gave you. Just when you thought things couldn't get worse, Athena appeared. It was a stormy night. You were praying alone in the temple, hoping to find some inner peace. Suddenly, blinding light filled the entire temple, and Goddess Athena appeared before you. She wore golden armor, held a spear and shield, her eyes burning with angry flames. Hope surged in your heart. Finally, Athena had come. She would bring you justice. She would punish Poseidon. She would clear your name. But the words Athena spoke completely shattered your hope. Medusa, the goddess's voice was cold as frost. You have defiled my temple. You have betrayed your vow to me. You have brought shame upon me before the gods. Goddess, I didn't. You tried to defend yourself, but Athena interrupted you. Do not make excuses. My temple has been desecrated, that is fact. Regardless of whose fault it is, you bear responsibility. You knelt on the ground, tears finally flowing. Goddess, I am the victim. Poseidon forced me. I have always served you faithfully. I never betrayed you. But Athena's expression showed no softening. Even so, the fact has occurred. I cannot punish Poseidon. He is my uncle, one of the main gods of Olympus. But I must be responsible for my temple's sanctity. You began to understand. Athena hadn't come to save you. She had come to punish you. Not because you had done anything wrong, but because she needed a scapegoat, needed someone to take responsibility for this desecration. And you, as the victim, had instead become the one most easily sacrificed. From now on, Athena raised her spear. You will no longer be the beautiful Medusa. Your beauty brought this disaster, so let it disappear forever. Your hair will become venomous snakes. Your eyes will bring death. Anyone who looks at you will turn to stone. You will become a monster, forever feared and hated by people. This is your punishment. No! You cried out in despair. This isn't fair. I'm innocent. But Athena's magic had already begun to take effect. You felt intense pain in your scalp as your beautiful golden hair began to writhe, turning into venomous snakes. Your skin became rough, your teeth became sharp, your eyes began to emit deadly light. Finally, Athena left you with one sentence. This is the path you chose. Now bear the consequences. Then she disappeared, leaving you alone in the empty temple, facing your completely changed body and utterly shattered life. You crawled to the sacred spring and looked at your reflection in the water. The beautiful, kind Medusa no longer existed. In her place was a terrifying monster. You wanted to cry, but found that even the right to weep had been taken from you, because your tears also carried the curse. Is this what they call justice? The victim is punished while the perpetrator goes free? In the days that followed, you hid in the temple's basement, not daring to see anyone. You were afraid to see the fear in their eyes, more afraid that your gaze would harm innocent people. You could only sneak out at night to find food, living in the shadows like a true monster. But soon you found that even this kind of life was unsustainable. The other priests discovered your existence. They fled in terror and quickly spread the news throughout Athens. People began to tell tales of a terrible monster living in the temple, that anyone who saw her would turn to stone. Brave warriors began coming to challenge you, hoping to kill you, this monster, and rid the people of harm. But ironically, their bravery became their fatal weakness. because anyone who looked directly into your eyes would instantly turn to stone sculpture. The first to turn to stone was a young soldier. He rushed into the temple, sword raised high, shouting that he would rid Athens of the monster. When he saw you, his expression changed from anger to shock, then froze forever. You looked at the statue he had become, your heart filled with fear and pain. "I don't want to hurt anyone," you wept to his statue. "I never wanted to hurt anyone." But more people came. Some for honor, some for money, others just to prove their courage. One by one, they turned to stone statues. The area around the temple soon became a sculpture garden. Each statue reminded you that you were no longer that kind guardian, but a monster who brought death. You began to understand that you couldn't stay here anymore. Your existence would only bring more death, more pain. So on a dark and windy night, you left Athens, left the temple that had once been your home, and walked toward the unknown wilderness. Life in the wilderness was lonely and painful. You found a remote cave as shelter, far from human settlements, with only wild beasts for company. But even the beasts would instinctively avoid you. You truly became the loneliest being in this world. In the long hours of solitude, you began to think about everything that had happened to you. You remembered the happiness of childhood, the satisfaction of serving in the temple, that terrible night that changed everything. You began to understand that what you experienced was not just personal tragedy, but society's secondary harm to victims. You realized that Poseidon had raped you, but society chose to blame you. Athena should have protected you, but chose to punish you. People should have sympathized with you, but chose to fear you. You became everyone's scapegoat for avoiding responsibility, the object of everyone's fear and hatred. But in this painful recognition, you also began to discover something different. You began to understand that you weren't the real monster. The real monsters were Poseidon, who raped you, Athena, who sacrificed you to maintain her authority, and the society that preferred to believe rumors rather than understand the truth. You began to understand that your anger was justified. Your pain was real. Your suffering was unfair. You shouldn't bear responsibility for others' crimes. You shouldn't feel ashamed of being a victim. This awakening of consciousness wasn't easy. In countless sleepless nights, you fought with the voices in your head. Sometimes you wanted to believe those accusatory voices, because self-blame was easier than facing the truth. Sometimes you wanted to give up because despair was safer than hope. But gradually, you began to find your power again. Not the cursed power to petrify others, but the spiritual strength deep within your heart. You began to understand that even if the whole world misunderstood you, you had to stick to your own truth. Even if everyone feared you, you had to remember the kindness in your heart. You began to re-examine your identity. Yes, your appearance was now frightening, your abilities dangerous, but these weren't your choice. You were still that kind Medusa, just forced to wear a monster's disguise. You still wanted to protect innocent people, just now you had to do it in a different way. You began to understand that maybe your curse could also become a kind of protection. Those evil people who wanted to harm the innocent would be too afraid of you to commit evil. Those truly good people, as long as they didn't look directly into your eyes, wouldn't be harmed. Maybe you could become a different type of guardian. In this awakening, you began to establish new rules for living. You would continue to live in remote places, avoiding harm to innocent people. But if evil people intruded into your territory, you wouldn't show mercy. You would use your power to protect those who couldn't protect themselves, even if they would never know of your kindness. You began to understand that true power doesn't come from others' recognition, but from knowledge of yourself. You didn't need the world's understanding. You only needed your own persistence. Years passed, and you established your new life in the wilderness. You learned to live with solitude. Learn to persist in your truth despite misunderstanding. Around your cave, a strange ecosystem gradually formed. Those who were truly evil would be petrified by your power, while those good but lost travelers, you would guide them without letting them see you. You began to receive some unexpected visitors. Some were people abandoned by society, falsely accused criminals, betrayed lovers, misunderstood sages. They had heard your story, not the version in heroic legends, but the true version. They came to your cave not to kill you, but to seek understanding. Medusa, a young girl abandoned by her family, called out to the cave, "I know your true story. I too have been misunderstood, been hurt. I want to tell you, you are not a monster." These words nourished your parched heart like sweet dew. You began to understand that although most people chose to believe those simplified legends, there are always some willing to learn the truth, willing to understand those marginalized by society. You began to help these people in your own way. You couldn't appear directly before them, but you could leave food for them at night. Use your power to drive away wild beasts that might harm them. You rediscovered the meaning of being a guardian. Only this time you protected not those under society's protection, but those abandoned by society. You also began to re-examine your relationship with your two sisters. Steno and Uriel were also affected by your ordeal. They chose to leave the ocean and come to land to accompany you. Although they weren't cursed, they were willing to share your loneliness and pain. Sister, Steno said to you, "We won't let you bear all this alone." "Yes," Euryale added, "we are the 3 Gorgon sisters. We stay together." With your sister's companionship, you began to build a new home. Not the kind recognized by society, but a home built of understanding, acceptance, and true love. The 3 of you lived together in the wilderness, protecting those who needed protection in your own way. You began to understand that maybe this was your true destiny. Not to become a goddess worshipped by people, nor to become a monster feared by people, but to become a real being. A being who experienced trauma but still chose kindness. A being who was misunderstood but still insisted on truth. A being who was abandoned by society but still willing to protect others. You began to write down your story not to defend yourself, but for those who had similar experiences. You carved the truth in ancient script on stone tablets, hoping that one day, when people were ready to hear the real voice, these words could bring them strength. "I was once Medusa," you wrote. "I once believed that kindness would be met with kindness, that justice would protect the innocent. I was wrong, but I don't regret having believed, because it was this belief that kept the light in my heart even in the darkest moments. I was hurt, betrayed, misunderstood. I was forced to bear guilt that wasn't mine, forced to accept unjust punishment. But I learned an important truth. Real power doesn't come from others' recognition, but from being true to yourself. My appearance now is frightening, my abilities dangerous, but I am still that Medusa who wants to protect others. Only now I protect those abandoned by society like me, those misunderstood like me, those who need to find their power again like me." As time passed, you began to hear different voices. Some poets began singing different versions of your story. Some sages began questioning traditional narratives. They began to ask, why should victims bear the perpetrator's guilt? Why should women's beauty become their original sin? Why does society always choose to punish the weak and protect the strong? These voices gave you hope. Maybe one day the truth would be accepted by more people. Maybe those who experienced similar trauma would find courage to redefine their identity. Maybe society would learn to distinguish real victims from real perpetrators. But even if that day never came, you had already found inner peace. You no longer needed external recognition to prove your worth. You no longer needed society's understanding to confirm your kindness. You knew who you were, you knew what you had experienced, you knew what you had chosen. On a moonlit night, as you sat alone outside your cave, looking at the starry sky, you suddenly felt an unprecedented freedom. Not physical freedom. You were still bound by the curse, still unable to freely interact with people. But spiritual freedom, you were finally no longer bound by others' gazes and judgments. You had finally become your true self. You remembered your childhood days in the underwater palace, remembered that innocent and kind little girl. She was still in your heart, had never truly disappeared. She had experienced great pain and trauma, been forced to wear a monster's disguise, but her essence had never changed. She still wanted to protect others, still believed in the power of love and kindness, still was willing to fight for justice. Only now she was stronger, wiser, more real. She had learned to find light in darkness, learned to persist in truth despite misunderstanding, learned to find strength in loneliness. When the first ray of morning light entered your cave, you felt a deep tranquility. You were no longer that girl who needed others' approval, nor that monster controlled by fear and anger. You were Medusa, a woman who experienced trauma but chose strength, a guardian who was misunderstood but persisted in truth, a soul who maintained kindness even in the darkest moments. Your story tells us that trauma doesn't define us. Others' misunderstanding doesn't change our essence. The real monsters aren't those who become frightening after being hurt, but those who hurt others yet escape responsibility. True power doesn't come from society's recognition, but from persisting in your authentic identity. In this world where injustice and misunderstanding still exist, may you be able to find inner strength like Medusa in the most difficult moments. May you be able to distinguish true good from evil. May you speak for those who are misunderstood. May you choose healing over hatred when facing trauma. Now, let Medusa's story accompany you into dreams. In your dreams, you will see true justice. You will feel true understanding. You will find true peace. May your heart be as tranquil as the deep sea. May your dreams be as beautiful as the starry sky. Good night. May you find your own power in your dreams. May you still remember when you wake that true beauty comes from inner kindness. True strength comes from persisting in truth. Sleep now. Let this story of trauma and rebirth become a forever source of strength in your heart.